Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Street podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me today, a phenomenal woman that I recently had an opportunity to connect with online. And when I got a glimpse of her story, I knew right away that I had to connect with her and see if she would be so gracious enough to be a guest on our show. And thank God she accepted the offer to do so, taking time out of her very busy schedule to hang out with us a little while with the hopes of encouraging and inspiring and uplifting through sharing of her story and what it means to go through the storms of life, facing adversity head on, but of course, most importantly, keeping God first in the process. She is a motivational speaker, empowerment coach, published author, but most importantly, she's a woman of God. And I'm so thankful to have her in our presence today. I'm excited to learn more about her story. I'm anticipating in advance that I'm going to be blessed, and I know all of you who are tuning in are going to be blessed as well. So it is my privilege and honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you Miss Latrea Russ. Latrea, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, you are so welcome. You're so welcome. It's such an honor to be here this evening. I thank you again for allowing me the space and the opportunity to share how good God has been to me. I tell people all the time, my story, it is my story, but it doesn't have anything to do with me. It's just who God is and who God is in my life and who I allow God to be and the things that God has done through me. So this has nothing to do with me at all. As you said in the intro, I am an empowerment coach. I'm a seven-time published author. I am also a preschool teacher. um, and I'm a two-time college graduate. I have my master's degree and my bachelor's degree. I'm actually getting ready to go back in the fall for my doctorate. So,
Mm,
yeah. But I'm
wow.
also a survivor. So I'm gonna throw that in there as well. Um, but yeah, that's who I am.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful. A great start to it all. And my listeners don't know this, of course, but before we even kicked off the show, we were having a couple little technical difficulties and Latria led us in prayer and we're already getting this thing on fire, getting it started off the right way. So super excited. So again, so glad to have you aboard. So with that said, since you gave the audience a little intro of yourself, we're going to go ahead and jump right into these segments for this evening so we can learn a little bit more about your story. So, Latria, I'm a firm believer that when it comes to the telling of our stories, our journeys, as we share that with those who are open and willing to listen to what we have to say about what that journey looks like, we would be remiss if we didn't take the opportunity to go back a bit. And when I say go back a bit, I believe it's always important to go back to the beginning from where it all starts, because that's the foundational basis where all of the beginning parts, begin to formulate and come into place that we may not understand all of it at that moment in time, but it begins to make sense and add up at a later point in time. So with that said, if you would take us back to the beginning, take us back to those childhood days, if you would, and share with us, what was it like for you growing up? Fond memories that you have about growing up, as well as if there's any specific challenges that come to mind that you had to deal with that you'd like to share about growing up. Again, just to give us the foundational basis of where your story begins.
Okay, well, I had a very different childhood, if you will. I was born with a disability. The name of my disability is called Pfeiffer syndrome. It's Piffer. And what that basically means is that the bones in your body don't fuse properly. So when we're born the way God created us. God created us in a way that our bones are supposed to naturally fuse together to create a structure. Like your arm, where your arm is made, the bones fuse together at the elbow to create the whole arm. But in my case, the bones did not fuse properly in my skull. So I had areas in my skull where the about that. My mama decided she wanted to call me in the mess. I'm so sorry about that. But at any rate, there was areas in my skull where the bone did not fuse properly, and then there were areas where there was no bone. my mother and tell her I'm in an interview. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Tell her I'm in an interview and I'll call her back when I'm done. All right. Yeah. So, essentially, when I was born, there was areas in my skull where my skull was exposed. Not skull, I'm sorry. There was areas in my brain where my brain was exposed because there was no bone. There was no bone to cover that area. And also, if we know anything about the brain and the skull area, we have stems that go all the way around our skull. And these stems are protective so that our skull is not just resting and hanging out on our brain. I didn't have those stems. So when I was born, my skull was practically crushing my brain.
Mm.
Um, I had my first operation when I was 2 months old, I believe, to relieve the pressure from my brain. I've had 35, 45 operations. There have been some operations they didn't think I was going to make it out of. There were some operations that, you know, they just were scared to do because they didn't know how my body was going to react to it. Um, so the flip side to that is my parents. My mom was addicted to crack, and my dad was an alcoholic. Now, a lot of times people, when they hear that, people often ask me, well, is that what caused your disability? No, that's not what caused my disability. My disability is a genetics, mutational thing. It had nothing to do with them doing drugs or drinking or anything like that. So I like to always clear that up. But um, the reason that I say I had a different childhood is because it was between going to the hospital or going to doctors all the time and then coming home to either no food in the house or um, my parents fighting or something crazy going on at the house. Um, I remember one time nobody paid the rent. So our furniture got set outside because when they put you out, they put all your stuff out. So I remember getting off the school bus and walking to my house. Now, I'm about, what, 8, 9 years old, okay? I'm getting off the school bus. Me and my friends, are we just talking. And I walk up and I see my couch, my chair, my bicycle, all of my toys on the front stoop. And how do you explain to your friends
Mm.
why your furniture is sitting outside on the sidewalk? And so I don't even remember what I told her. But she asked me, she's like, why isn't that your furniture? Isn't that your furniture? I was like, yeah, it is. But needless to say, I was kind of embarrassed. I remember one time my dad had to sleep on the furniture outside so nobody would take it.
Mm.
But I do want people to also know and understand that even though I had those memories, I also have fond memories of growing up. It's one of those situations like when you're poor, but you don't know that you're poor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we didn't have a lot. We just didn't. And that was just the way it was. But my dad always tried to create the best memories he could create. My mom tried to. They just always tried to create memories. Like, for example, in our backyard, I remember they had a garden, and they used to let me work in the garden with them. They had tomatoes and cucumbers and all types of vegetables, greens, all types of things in the garden. It wasn't nothing big, but it was just, enough for us. And they
Mm-hmm.
would show me how to, tend the soil and plant the seeds. Now, of course, none of that I remember, but they did show me how to do that. I don't have a green thumb at all, but they did show me how to do that. Um, I remember me and my dad, we both have a love for cucumbers. So he would go out to the garden, and he would get cucumbers, get the nice ripe ones, and he would cut them up, and he would peel them and cut them up, and put them in like a little Tupperware bowl and put some salt and some pepper and vinegar and put them in the refrigerator. And we would sit on the back porch and eat them.
Mm,
Every 4th of July, I love fireworks. So every 4th of July, my dad would go across the line and get this big old thing of fireworks. And we would sit in the backyard on the 4th of July all night and do nothing but shoot fireworks. So those are some of my fond memories that I had of my growing up. So you sometimes you gotta take the good with the bad.
mm, mm, mm. Love that. Love that. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Washington D.C.
Okay. Okay.
Well, not right outside of Washington D.C. The area that I grew up in was called PG County, Maryland, and I
Hmm.
say Washington D.C. because when I say PG County, Maryland, nobody knows where that is. So I was like right on the outskirts of
Hmm.
D.C.
I'm actually familiar with PG County because
Oh, really? Okay.
my in laws live in Maryland.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay. Okay.
yes, they live in Upper Marlboro.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yep, and I have I've had other family members that lived in the DC area, so so I mean, I do have some familiarity with that area. But wow,
Okay. Okay.
wow. Let me first off say I appreciate your transparency and sharing about your childhood. I think what I find to be interesting right out the gate is, of course, you explained what your specific, this is that it was a genetic disability that
Mhm.
you were born with, but even as you shared the story, you know, I, I immediately connected with the fact that you just have a positive energy about yourself. I'm sure it wasn't easy, obviously, to come up with, growing up and having to, like you said, with all of the surgeries and going to the doctor and all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I love the fact that it's clear to me that you didn't allow your circumstances to bring you down. It was one of those things where you was like, you know what, it is what it is. This is how God made me. I'm gonna take it for what it's worth, and I'm gonna make the most out of it. And so, hearing you talk about, having good times with your, with other kids, or specifically with your parents, because it's interesting that you spoke about how dad struggled with crack, mom struggled with alcohol, yet they both still, even in the midst of their personal challenges, they still were trying to make an enjoyable and memorable life for you, in terms of whether it was the fireworks, whether it's the cutting up of the cucumbers and the working in the garden and all of that good stuff. So, there's just something beautiful about all of that. And it's just a reminder that we just got to appreciate the small things in life, because it's so tempting on our part that when things don't go our way, when life throws us a curve, when the situations aren't perfectly set up for us, it's real easy for us to complain and moan and whine and be honest, be ungrateful for just life. And so I have an appreciation for you, because you give a refreshing perspective as to, look at what I've had to go through just starting out of the gate, what I had to go through, and yet you're not complaining. You're not putting on this, woe is me, pity party type thing. And so that's refreshing. And I think it's critical for our listeners who are, when you start talking about the adversities and the storms of life, everybody's going to get hit by them. Or we may not have the same exact storms, but we're going to all get hit by them. But it's, what do you do? How do you respond when you're in those moments? And so
Right.
I just appreciate your positive energy in that regard, just telling the very early stages of your story. So I just wanted to point that out, because it's
Thank
definitely
you. Thank you
refreshing.
so much. But I will say, I it took me many years to get there.
Hmm.
I would love to say that, oh yeah, I've always been like that. No, I haven't. I haven't. I know that there have been many times that I questioned God. And me and God, we've had many powwows. It's funny because I've had a very, people tell me that I have a direct connection to God, and I believe that I do. I've always had that. Like, I can remember being 5, 6 years old in the bathtub talking to God. I can remember being behind the couch looking out the window talking to God. So I've always had that level of communication with him. And the thing about it was when all of these things was going on, the question I always had was why? You know, why do I have to go through this? Why? I remember being I think I was about 10 years old. I remember being wheeled into surgery. And I remember crying out to God, why? I can't do this anymore. I can't, my body cannot take this anymore. I am tired. I'm physically tired. I'm mentally tired. I'm tired. And God said to me the same way. Now, people think I'm crazy when I say this, but this is the God's honest truth. As I am sitting here talking to you, God told me, He was like, hold on,
Mm,
I got you.
mm,
And I promise you, for a lot of my life, that's all I had.
mhm,
That's all I had. Because his word says that he is not a man that he should lie. So when he says he got me. And it may not
mm,
always look like it. But because he told me he had me, that is the faith that I operate on. I operate on the faith of what he told me, not what it looks like, not what it feels like, not what it seems like. God himself told me, I got you.
mm.
So I just want to add that in there.
No, I appreciate you adding that because what you've done is you've let let our listeners know that, and this is something that I speak to from time to time as well, is that it's okay for you to feel some kind of way about about God in terms of why am I going through what I'm going through, whether it's a health issue, whether it's financial issue, whether it's some other type of thing going on. We're human beings, and God
Right,
understands that we're not going to always understand the why of it all.
right,
But what I love about in your scenario, which I think is very important, is that if you keep your heart and mind open and be in a relationship with God, He will give you what you need. And in your case, He said to you, "I got you." And you said this was all that I had to hold on to. But you know what? That was all you needed to hold on to. God was at that very early age, He was already positioning you. He was already putting you together, setting you up, structuring your life in such a way for the work that He had planned ahead for years down the road that you had no idea that you were going to be doing. You had no idea at 5 years old when you're in the bathtub or looking out the window that God was setting you up to be an empowerment coach, that He was setting you up to be on stages in front of people, to be of encouragement and uplift people, that He was setting you up to teach young people, that He was setting you up to write books. You didn't have any idea about that. And if somebody would have talked about that early on in your life, seeing and knowing everything that you were going through, that would have probably been the furthest thing from their minds as far as you even coming in anything close to accomplishing anything like that. But God, when God says, and as you said, God's promises, you can take that to the bank. He's
that's
never
right,
going to lie to you. He's never going to deceive you. If He says it's going to be all good, if He say that this is going to happen for you, it doesn't matter what the world thinks. It doesn't matter what
that's
it look
right,
like,
that's
feel like,
right,
or
that's
anything of that
right.
like. So I appreciate you giving the human element because again, we're not up. While we are acknowledging, the importance of God and having Him at the head of everything that you're doing in your life and all that's happening in your life. We're not trying to be all super sane or anything up in here, but we're keeping it real at the same time and letting you know
Mhm.
that even believers feel some kind of way sometime, and
Right.
you have to have them.
Yeah.
You got to have them
Because anybody,
powwows.
there have been some moments when I'm like, okay, God,
You play too much.
what we
What's up with
doing?
this? What
What's
we
going
doing?
on here? I'm a little confused. but
So I yes, yes. So I appreciate that honesty, but at the same time, at the end of the day, when you know God, you know Him, and when you see it, and when you get the opportunity for those who have exposed themselves and allowed themselves to be in relationship with God, and you see how He's moved in situations that you can't even put into words. That
right,
if you told somebody the story, they might even give you the side eye, thinking that you had to
right,
make that up. And you're
right.
like, no, I know it sounds
No.
crazy, but I ain't making this up. This is exactly
Nah,
how it
this
went
is not
down.
made up at all.
So yeah, this is powerful stuff. I love it, love it. So Latria, obviously, as we move on through our lives, we go through our childhood, entering into adulthood. the experiences still come, the storms still come, but and of course you got some pretty heavy storms at a very early age, but there are some times, and we've already kind of alluded to that. There are some moments in time where those storms hit so heavy where we're like, how am I going to get through this? I mean, and just even if as we reflect on your own life, you were already going through some storms that the average person would have threw their hands up and gave up on. But, so even in the midst of that, it's hard to even imagine you going through something even deeper than that to made you say, you know what? I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know how I'm going to overcome this. This is just too much for me. Clearly you're here today, so we can trust and believe that just as we got through speaking about, God has navigated you through even in those type of trying situations. But if you would share with us a time, even in the midst of all that you've been through, share with us a time where there was a moment that you felt like, I don't know how I'm getting through this one. And we done been through a lot, God. I done got through a lot of stuff. I don't know how I'm gonna get through this. You didn't see any hope. You didn't see any way. If you would kind of walk us through what was that situation like for you, and what was that turning point where you began to see some light at the end of the tunnel and coming up out of that situation?
Okay. The one situation that comes to mind in thinking about that would be where I had to testify in court and tell the judge that I did not want to live with my mother anymore.
Mm,
And my mother was sitting in the courtroom. And I could close my eyes and I could go back to that moment like it was yesterday and remember what I was feeling, remember what was going on. And I think that was the hardest thing that I had ever had to do to date.
mm,
Um, what was happening was we were put in foster care. I was 12 and my sister was 2. I think she was 2. But anyway, we had been put in foster care. We have been in foster care for about 5, 6 years. Um, my dad had gave up his parental rights because, as you know, he was alcoholic, so he couldn't take us anywhere. But my mom was still trying to fight for her parental rights. Now, we had been in the system, like I said, 5, 6 years. And the judge was like, okay, well, she's not trying to get it together, so we're going to terminate her rights. Now, by me being 16, I could say whether or not I wanted to be adopted. And whether I, yeah, whether I wanted to be adopted or not. Because the option was never to go back to her. The option was either to be adopted or stay in foster care till you age out. But the option was never to go back to her.
mm,
So, I chose to be adopted. And that was hard because I felt like I had turned my back on her. I felt
right.
like she was the only one I had. Well, I'm sorry, I was all she had. And I turned my back on her. And I feel like I chose a better life over her. And I remember praying and I remember asking God, am I making the right choice? Am I doing the right thing? Is this right? Because I'm the kind of person that I never want to move out of step with God because the consequences are very bad when you do that. So I just remember that the night before court, just continue like God. If I'm not doing the right thing, please don't let this go through. If this is not what you have for me, if this is not the life that you have for me, please don't let it go through. Whatever your will is for my life is what I want. I don't want it no other way if you're not in it. Now I'm 16 praying prayers like that. And so I got to court that day, still nervous, and I went into the bathroom before I got on stage. I said, okay, God. I said, we've reached this moment. I said, you ain't pulled the plug on it yet. So I'm guessing this is the direction that you want me to go in. And he said the same thing to me that he always says. Hold on, I got you.
Mm,
So with that, I boldly got on the stand and said, I don't want to live with my mother anymore. I want to be adopted. Now, the humanistic side of me was hurt because that's my mother.
mm,
But the spiritual side of me knew that I was going to be okay because, once again, God said He had me. So that was one time. I have another time if you want. I can add
it,
another time in there.
it's up to
Um,
you.
Another time I was like that was when I was in a foster home, and this foster home was very, very, very abusive.
Mm,
They would let you they would let you shower. You could only take one shower a week. You had to go down. I had to go downstairs and use the bathroom downstairs and take bird baths. I wasn't allowed to use the shower. I wasn't allowed to bathe but once a week. Um, when you were punished, you were made to stand in the corner for long periods of time. You were just made to just stand there. I mean, sometimes you be standing there so long, you don't even know why you're standing there.
mm,
And so once again, I went back to God. So, okay, God, why, why? And like, where do I go from here? Like, what else can happen? What else can go wrong at this point? What else can you do? What else? What else you gonna throw on me? What else? And it just seemed like, and again, hold on, I got you. So when I tell people that that's all I've ever had to go on, that
mm,
is really all I've ever had to govern my life with. I haven't had man come in. And see, God is particular in that way because God wants to make sure He gets the glory for it. So He's
mm-hmm,
not going to let man come in and do it. He's
mm,
not going to let man be involved. He wants to get the glory for it. So He's going to do it. He's going to speak into your life. He's going to be your anchor. He's going to be what you need him to be when you need him to be it because he wants to get the glory from it. So you can never say, oh, well, man did this and man did that and man did this and man did that. I, I can't say that. I don't know about anybody else's testimony, but I know for a fact I can't say that. I am sitting here today talking to you strictly because God is who God is.
wow. Wow. Again, appreciate your transparency. What a powerful message right there. Like I said, I got you. God's got you. I mean, just the you really it's really a convicting message that you just shared because again, not only to my listeners but to myself even just again, I just think back as you're sharing your story, the times that complained and fussed about this, that, or the other. And, it's so easy to get caught up into that cycle. But, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that, who are we leaning on? Who are we trusting in? And that is God. That really is the ultimate takeaway that not only from myself but from my listeners I want everybody to take away from. It's got to be about God because as you stated, He wants to get the glory. He wants to take the credit, and when He's made up in His mind that He wants something for your life, there's nothing that anybody can do to disrupt that. But He's also not going to share the credit on that. He's going to
Right.
do it in such a way, and that's what we were talking about earlier about how God just moves in such a way in our lives when especially when we open ourselves up and allow Him to do so, and we operate in faith and obedience. He can move in such a way that it'll be so distinctively different from anything that anybody that we see with our own eyes, any man or woman can do that you're going to know that it was nobody else but God that made that happen. It was nobody that could have done this, and that's what makes the relationship. That's what makes him so powerful, so worthy to to be revered, so worthy to be followed, so worthy to be in relationship with. So I just appreciate you just keep driving that home about, look, every time you tell an element of your story, it's like you thought she went through that, but then she hit you with this, and then she went through that. But God, but God, but God. It keeps coming back to God. And yes, in your human nature, you still are asking, okay, Lord, I done went through this stuff over here. Now, why you got me going through this here? Why would you, put me in a foster home system, with a family that was gonna treat me like this? Where are we going with this? But again, as I reflect on what you do today, as crazy as it sounds of the things that you had to go through, again, this is all a part of the plan. But and if God had told you in advance, when you think about all that you've done, even up to this point, if He would have let you know up front, okay, Latrea, this is what you're going to have to go through to get to this point, you or most people wouldn't have said, okay, let me sign
Yeah.
up for that. you know.
You know what? It's so funny because people ask me that. They was like, if you knew then what you know now, would you do it all again? Now, some people would say no. I would say yes because I believe that God used my pain
Mhm.
to push me to my purpose.
Yes.
And if I didn't have that pain, then I wouldn't be able to recognize what my purpose is because it's all connected.
Hmm.
It's all interweaved and it's all connected. And the crazy thing about this is that particular foster home that I was in, they were pillars in the church.
Mm.
It was one. The father was an elder. I'm sorry. The husband was an elder. The wife played. She sang on the choir. They had us in church all the time, but taking us home, treating us like trash. Now, for some people, that would have made them turn their back on God.
Mm.
Because some people would say, okay, God, if you're this and you're that, then why did you put me with these people that are that's supposed to serve you?
Hmm.
But they treat us like that. So this is how you're supposed to treat your people. But I never felt that way because I guess I had the ability to separate God from man.
That
And I
part.
tell people all the time, when I go to church, I go to meet God. I don't go for the pastor. I don't go for anybody else but God. If God don't meet me in that sanctuary, that was not the church for me.
Mm.
And that is clearly why I go. So going through all of that in that particular home, I was still talking to God. I was still communicating with him. And I was still he was still a big part of my life. But the reason I say that is because a lot of people would say, well, yeah, well, if they're supposed to be so godly, then why are they treating you like that? And if
Hmm.
God is supposed to be so this, that, and the third, why is he allowing them to treat you that way? And I'd be like, well, God is God, and they are them. So you
Hmm.
can't. They're not the same. It's not the same entity.
Yes, yes. And it's so interesting that you made mention of that, because just earlier today, I was literally just reflecting on a period of time in my life, specifically around the time before I gave my life to Christ. And, um, and I remember shortly after that going through a situation where my faith was being tested, specifically in church. And to what you just said was something that I was marinating on, about how you had to separate God and man. That like you just shared. Like, people hear that story, they hear that part of the story, and they say, "Well, why would you?" That's exactly why I don't go to church. That's exactly why I don't do this or that or other. Because these people who call themselves Christian, these people who call themselves men and women of God, look at what they do. Well, they're human beings just like you, just like everybody else is. They fall short. They have weaknesses, They have areas of growth that they need to be in. That doesn't justify what they did. But at the
Right.
same time, at the end of the day, your eyes are supposed to be on what God says and what God has for you, not what man has for you. And so I loved, even when you talked about when I go up into the church, I go up into the church and I'm seeking the presence of God in the church. And that's what determines whether or not this is the right space that I'm supposed to be in. Is God here? Not the pastor, not the choir, not sister such and such and brother such and
Right.
such.
Right.
I'm
Right.
here for God.
Right.
And if he's here, then I'm here. But if he's not
That's
here,
right.
then that's my cue that
That's my
I
cue.
need to
That
be
means
up
you're
out of
not the
here.
place for me.
So even in that abusive situation that you were in with quote unquote believers, in the home doing these things to you, at the same time, just the spiritual maturity that you had to separate man from God. And and just remembering God's message to you all along from as far back as you can remember. I got you. I got you. I know this is crazy. I know it don't make sense. I know it seems out of sorts, but I got you, and you just got to trust that. And
Right.
I'm not saying that that's easy to do. It is
Oh
not
no,
easy to
no,
do.
no. There've
In
been
no
plenty of
means.
times where that's been very, very difficult to do. But that's where your faith comes in.
Yeah.
That's where your faith comes in. And faith is not something you see. Faith is something you trust.
Mm, mm,
And so you have to trust what God said. He has a whole book of promises that He has made to us. And he doesn't even ask us, all He asks us to do was just believe and have faith in His promises.
mm.
That's all. And so when I tell people that's all I had, that's all I had. I mean, I didn't have anybody, fighting for me in my corner. Well, I had God, but man fighting for me in my corner. I didn't have, you know, relatives or anything like that. I had God. So I'm saying all that to say a lot of times when I say stuff like that, people always ask me, well, how do you know? How do you know? I said, I don't, but I know God. But I know God. I might not know how this is going to turn out. I might not know what the outcome is going to be. And I know the beginning looking a little crazy, but God has never left me. He has never failed me. Now, He
Mm-mm.
hasn't done things the way I wanted Him to. I will say that. But He's never failed me. He's never left me. He's always been right there beside me. Even when I didn't feel it. Believe it or not, when you don't feel it, that's when He's the closest.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Wow, wow. This is a very powerful conversation we're having here, and again, I'm so appreciative of your transparency and just your just rawness and sharing all of this. This is a message we need to hear today, and apply to our day to day walk. Because when we talk about those promises, the one thing God didn't promise us, He didn't promise us that we would never go through anything.
That's right.
He, so don't get that mindset of thinking that just because you give your life to Christ, just because you're in a relationship with God, that you're somehow in this protective bubble where you don't go through anything anymore. In fact, you should probably expect things to get a little bit more intensified
Yeah.
because there's an
Yeah.
enemy out there that's
Mm-hmm.
that's that's mad,
Mm-hmm.
furious that you're even walking this path. So
Mm-hmm.
it's going to get crazier. But
Right.
again, but God, if I got God in my life, I'm in relationship with Him. His message is simple, as you clearly put it throughout our conversation so far, is that I got you. And if you can just trust in I got you, it doesn't matter what the storm looks like. If you can trust in I got you, it doesn't matter that you don't know all the particulars and details how
Right.
it's going to work out
Right.
because I said I got you. And
Right.
and 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 I'm sure you can attest to this just as I can. I don't know of a time when he didn't where his promise failed. I don't know of a time where he set up something and it didn't go through the way it was supposed to.
Right.
Typically, when things don't work out the way they're supposed to, is because of our doing.
Right.
It's because of our
Right.
straying, not because of
Right.
something that
Right. And
that he's
and
orchestrated. So,
right. And we so quick to want to blame. We don't want to take responsibility. I feel sometimes we don't want to take responsibility for our action. And it's just easier to say, oh, well, you know, maybe God just didn't want me to have that, or maybe that was just not something God wanted me to do. Well, you have to ask yourself, did you do your part?
Mm.
Did you do what God had asked you to do? Because we all have a role to play. We all have a part to play in it. Because again, the word tells us faith without works is dead. We can have all the faith in the world, but if we're not putting that faith to work, then God is not a genie in a bottle that He's just gonna
Right,
snap and
right,
make it happen.
right.
We gotta put some work to that
Mm.
faith.
Exactly, exactly. And some of the best responses, or I should say, one of the best responses that God can tell you at times is actually a no,
Right,
because we'll go to God and ask Him for this, that, and the other, but in His infinite wisdom, He knows if we ready for that,
right,
if we can handle that. So you should be, and it took me a while to learn that, but over time I've gotten to the point where I'm more thankful for the no's than I am the yeses,
right, right.
because you stopped me from walking into something that was going to
Right,
mess me up,
that I was
that I was
obviously
not
not ready
ready
to
for.
handle.
I wasn't ready to handle that. You kept me from settling for less
Right,
in someone or something. You know, Thank you for your interference in that,
right,
because I was seeing it through my eyes, but you got a vision, you got an insight to the situation that I
right,
don't have. And
right.
so, we have to embrace that. And the last thing I wanted to get to on this is, like, when we're talking about why me for this and why me for that, you kind of have to ask yourself, why not you?
Right.
Because if he can sacrifice his son on the cross
Come on now.
for sins that not sins that he did, sins that we did,
That's right.
I don't know anybody who would have taken his place on that cross. So if he can sacrifice his own son for our benefit, then
What
why
makes us
not
so
you?
different? What
What
makes us
makes you
so special?
special? What makes you
Right. What makes us
excluded
so special?
from going through whatever it is that you go
Right.
through? So
Right.
we have to remember that and not get so cutesy or so feel entitled, if you will, like as if we're not supposed to go through
Right. And we're not
that.
supposed to go through nothing.
Yeah. So good stuff. Good stuff. So, Latria, when you do find yourself facing adversity, and clearly we've talked about some really heavy stuff, but there's some days when it's not necessarily always super heavy like what we've talked about. Sometimes it's just regular day to day lifing type stuff. But
Hmm.
nevertheless, when you find yourself facing adversity, I'm curious to know, what is your routine, your process, if you will, that you like to go through that kind of helps you to, in a healthy and appropriate way, work through challenging times. What is it that works best for you?
Well, most of the time when I go through challenges like day to day challenges, to me, that's saying that I'm not centered or I'm off kilter, if you will. So, and my husband has seen me do this. I will go in the bathroom, cut the light off, turn on my praise and worship, I just go in and just start praising and worshiping God.
Hmm.
That's how I get back on center. That's how I get back on course. And of course, praying. And my daughter used to make fun of me because I would be in our den and I would turn on my praise and worship music, and it would be like I'm the only one there. Me and God are the only two there. And every morning before I go to work, and I don't know why, but God only talks to me in the bathroom. I don't know why, but that's here or there. At any rate, I gotta go in the bathroom, cut the light out. It gotta be dark, and I'll do praise and worship, and I'll pray, and that's what gets me back right. That's what gets me back centered. Um,
Love that.
because my job is very stressful, and yeah, working with young people is very stressful sometimes. And it's not even so much the young people; it's the adults. I mean, it's not. I'm sorry. It's not the kids. Now I do have some interesting children, but it's not necessarily them. It's more or less their their parents. And then I'm like, okay, God. this is what you have me to do in this season. If this is what you're having me to do in this season, then I'm going to need you to give me the patience to guide me through this. Because there are some days, there are some days. But yes, I pray. I pray and I talk to God. Because again, if we're going back to the word. The word says we're supposed to be praying without ceasing.
Hmm.
So there are times throughout the course of my day I could be doing something like, okay, God, um, yeah, this is what I'm feeling right now. This is what I'm dealing with right now. Of course, I know you see it, but I want to tell you how I'm feeling about it. Or I want to tell you what I'm experiencing in this moment.
Gotcha, gotcha. Love that.
It's
Love
funny
that
because my
approach.
kids see me do it sometimes. They're like, "Say, are you talking to yourself?" I'm like, no, I'm not talking to myself. I said,
Mm-mm-mm.
I'm talking to God. Really? Really? Wow. And then one kid went home and told his mom, like, Miss Latrea talks to God.
That's
And
awesome.
she came to school and told me, she was like, you pray a lot, don't you? I said, yeah. She was like, yeah, because Alana came home and told me that you talk to God.
That's great. That is
I
great.
said, well, hey, who else to talk to? I mean, who better to
Hmm.
talk to than God?
There you go. And like I said, you've been doing this since you were a little kid, anyways. As
Right.
little as they are, so it's just been
Yeah.
a thing that you do. So
Right.
awesome, awesome. Love that. Love that. So, Latria, if you had an opportunity to speak to the younger Latria, when you think back now of all the experiences, the things that you've gone through, good, bad, or otherwise, if you could sit across the table from her and pour into some words of encouragement, some insight that you wish she knew about, or if there's somebody that's listening to this show and they're going through some of the challenges that you've dealt with in your past and you've been able to overcome and work through. What would be your words of wisdom, your words of encouragement and advice to them to that younger Latria,
Um,
or as to this is some keys of things that you can do to handle the challenging times in life.
I would tell her something that I learned so late in life, so late in life. And I wish I had learned this when I was younger. I could have saved myself a lot of heartache and pain if I had learned this when I was younger. You are beautifully, wonderfully made
Mm,
in God's image. It has nothing to do with what man says you are or what man says you're not. You are beautifully, wonderfully made in the image of God. You look the way you're supposed to look. You are the way that you're supposed to be. You're not a oops. You're not a ups. You're not a mistake. You're not a my bad. You are exactly who and what God has designed you to be. And I say that because growing up in and out of the church and having a disability and understanding how, I'm going to say religious, people view disability. And I think it's based on the Old Testament where disability was viewed as a sin. And you were disabled. If you were disabled, it was something that your parents did, or something that happened in your generation, or something in a generational thing.
mhm,
And so they viewed my disability. There were some churches that I was in that viewed my disability as a sin. And, I'm like, I never understood that. And I remember one Sunday, the the pastor was doing an altar call, and he asked everybody to come up that want to be healed, delivered, set free. So me, in all my infinite wisdom, said, "Okay, I'm going to be healed today." And so I went up there. He prayed, put the oil on my head. He prayed, And then I went back to my seat. And I went back to my seat the same way I did when I went up there. I looked the same way. So I said, okay. I said, well, maybe it takes some time to work. So I'm still waiting for this healing to come.
Hmm.
So the next week, she does it again. I go up there again. I go back to my seat, looking the same way I did when I went up there. So I said, okay, God, you got to explain this to me. How does this healing thing work? Because obviously it's not working on me. Am I doing something wrong? What's wrong? But then God showed me you can't fix something that's not broken.
Mm.
So there
Mm.
was nothing in me
Wow.
physically that needed to be healed. I was physically what he needed me to be to get his message across. I was physically what he needed me to be to get his agenda done. I was already physically what he needed me to be.
Mm.
So there was nothing that needed to be healed. Take it a step further, and maybe you being a pastor, maybe you could help me with this. The way that I think about it is, if you are created in the image of God, you are created the way God wants you to be created, then what needs to be healed?
As you said, if I'm going up there and I'm thinking it's something physical that needs to be healed, and like you said, nothing's changed, then maybe the healing is something within.
Okay,
Maybe I need to. For some of us, that healing that's we've been waiting to have happen is a healing that I believe needs to will only be ignited because perhaps you need to forgive something.
okay, okay,
That's
okay.
probably one of the major things that I think people struggle in attaining that quote unquote healing that they're seeking. you
Mhm,
know why am I feeling so brokenhearted? Why haven't I gotten over that bad relationship, that the
mhm,
way that friendship that went awry,
mhm.
or what have you? Well, have you forgiven that individual? Well,
Okay,
well, well, look
okay,
what they did to me. Why would I forgive them? Yeah, they did something to you that was very hurtful, very deceitful, very painful. But forgiveness is for you.
right. And it's funny that you mentioned forgiveness, because me and my husband have this conversation all the time about my biological mother.
Hmm.
And he knows the story of the things that she has done, and the foster care and all the craziness I've been through with her. And sometimes she's not the nicest person. But she always asks me, but time and time again, you still go out of your way to have a relationship with her. Time and time again, you still go out of, she can talk to you like a dog in the street, but you never disrespect her. You still go out of your way to have a relationship with her. Why? And I said, well, two reasons. Number one, God can't take me where he's trying to take me with unforgiveness in my heart. I can't do the will of God with unforgiveness in my heart. I can't. That's just, it's not going to work. I can't do the will of God with unforgiveness in my heart. And that's all I want to do is the will of God. And I can't accomplish that with unforgiveness in my heart. And number two, who am I not to forgive? Who am I not to forgive? Because we would want God to forgive us. And we, Lord knows, we sin daily. And we done done some things that we are not necessarily proud of. So what if God says, you know what? You hurt my feelings, so I'm not going to forgive you.
Mm.
A lot of us would be in trouble.
May be in trouble. Yeah.
So that's how I look at it. Like, who am I not to forgive somebody? Who am I not to have grace? Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to continue to allow you to abuse me and mistreat me.
Right.
But at the same token, I can recognize who you are and what you're capable of, but I can still show you the love and the grace of God.
Mm. Yep. That part. That part right there. Um, and that's what a lot of times people confuse when we talk about, as we're discussing this topic of healing, where it's on the inside more than the outside, and that forgiveness piece. That's the thing. A lot of times people don't want to, want to forgive because they think somehow that you're condoning the behavior, you're condoning the mistreatment, you're condoning the abuse. No, no. Again, the forgiveness is for you. When you can forgive as you would want God to forgive you, then that's what turns that ignites the healing process for you. That allows you to be able to move forward, for you to take what took place, glean from it what you're supposed to learn from it, and then moving forward, know how to operate accordingly. Now, as far as that individual is concerned, does that mean that you have to be best buds with that person, or in your case, with your mom? Does that mean that you have to be, cruel to her or disrespectful to her or anything like that? No, no, in fact, I can be cordial. I can still treat you with respect, um, treat you with love and kindness. Whether you receive that or not, that's on you.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, I answer to God. And if
That's
God knows that I'm treating you in love, that I'm dealing with you in love, in spite of what our
right.
past might look like,
Right.
then you're only cutting your blessing off by not receiving that love from me.
Right.
Because I got every reason in the world, if I'm going by worldly standards,
Right.
to
Right.
ignore
Right.
you, to dismiss you, to maybe even get you back, for some of the things you've done to me. But that's not how God equipped me. That's not how He built me.
Right.
He said, "You're bigger than that. You rise above that." I'm not telling you to go back in there and be abused and beat on some more, and
Right.
and whether it's verbally, physically, or what have you. But
Right.
I'm also not telling you to go mistreat either. And again,
Right.
and it's funny we're talking about this because I was again reflecting on a situation, earlier today, and I was, and that was one of the things as I'm having my conversation with God is, I understand that while even when we mess up, it still doesn't make it okay for us to mistreat the person that messed up because
Right.
everybody falls short.
Right.
Everybody does. I
Right.
don't care how holy you think you are, how perfect you
Okay.
think you are. We, as you said, we sin daily, and there's going to be a time when you're going to say, when you're going to do, when you're going to behave in a way that is not in alignment with God's will,
right.
and you're going to want forgiveness for that. You're going to want
Right.
grace. You're going to want mercy. So, what makes it be okay when it's your turn, but it's not okay when it's somebody else's turn?
Right. Right.
So we got to keep that in mind. Again, for our listeners, I want you to embrace that. Understand, the forgiveness goes across the board. It's for everybody.
Right.
Sin is sin. You don't get to differentiate it. Well, this is a first
Right.
degree
Right.
sin,
And
and
a
this is a
lot of
second degree
times,
one. In a
right, a lot of times people like to cherry pick
uh
and
huh.
determine, well, that sin is worse than this sin, or this sin is worse than that sin. When we're talking about sin, sin is sin is sin is sin.
Hmm.
It don't change. It's not one is better than the other. It's not one is worse than the other. No. In God's eye, a sin, adultery is just like lying.
Hmm.
And in God's eyes, it's the same
It's
thing.
the same thing. Yep. It's exactly the same thing. Is There's no differentiating. Sin is sin. But yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up about the healing and using your example about, because again, people oftentimes, the healing is not just an external thing; it's also an internal thing, and particularly when it's internal, forgiveness is oftentimes that missing piece that's lurking in the midst. And so, if you're somebody that's tuning in and you struggle with that, please pray on that. Please let that be something that you get better at doing. I don't care what anybody says or does to you. You have to learn to forgive because that forgiveness is for you. It's for you.
Yeah,
And
and I've been put in situations where I've had to forgive, but my flesh didn't want to.
mm-hmm,
Like we were, as I said before, me and my sister was adopted, and the home that we were adopted in, the male in that home had been molesting my sister since she was 2. So he
mm,
molested her from 2 all the way up to age 9. I believe. 9 or 10. I don't remember. And I felt guilty because that was my sister and I was supposed to take care of her. And that was always been my charge to take care of her. And just to think about somebody doing that to her, when I tell you, that was the hardest thing I had to do. Ooh, that was so hard. And I remember praying and asking God, please, please do not allow hate to creep into my heart. Because I've never, in my 45 years on the face of this earth, have never, ever told anybody that I hate them. In my home, the word hate was a bad word. We just don't say that. We don't say you hate anything. You don't hate
Right.
anybody. That's just not something you say. So when that situation happened and I found out about it, all I knew to do was pray and ask him not to allow hate to creep into my heart for this man. Not to allow, because that's what the devil wants. He
Mm-hmm.
wants that hatred. He wants that disdain to creep in. So that's why, sometimes when things like that happen, the first thing we need to do is pray. Because we don't want to leave any openings. We don't want to
Mm-mm.
leave any holes or any um gashes or spaces where the devil could creep in. That's the first thing we need to do is pray and say, okay, God, you know what I'm dealing with. You know what this is. I ask that you just protect my heart, protect my soul, and not allow any type of hatred or malice to creep in. And I had to pray. And I remember going to the altar and I told God, I said, God, I'm going to leave this right here. I'm going to leave this right here because as guilty as I feel, this had nothing to do with me. This had nothing to do with her. It had everything to do with the person that did it. So I'm not going to carry this anymore. This is not my bag to carry. I'm going to leave this right here. And you being the God that you are, I know that you're going to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that day I got up and I left it right there. I didn't pick it back up. I didn't carry it anymore. I made a firm decision to leave it right there.
And what you just spoke to goes right back to the discussion we just had. When you went to God and you let that guilt on the altar, what you did for yourself, and what many of our listeners need to keep in mind is that you allowed yourself to forgive yourself. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive
Yes,
is you.
yes, yes,
You were
yes.
carrying a guilt. You felt bad about not doing something. You
Right,
felt bad about maybe I didn't step into the role the way that I was supposed to as the big sister. There's
right,
other people who made mistakes and they genuinely and authentically feel bad that they did what they did. And they walk around with that guilt, never forgiving themselves for what they did, and the
right.
enemy loves that. He
Yeah.
wants you to carry that guilt and to beat yourself up over and over and over again, and to replay what went down over and over and over
Hmm.
again. And there are
Hmm.
people, and I've been guilty of it before on multiple occasions in my life. And some people, they have gone through that cycle not just for a few days. You got people who've gone through this cycle for weeks, months, and even years, where they have
Yes.
held on to guilt, and God has already forgiven you. He forgave you long ago, and yet you still walking
You're
around
still walking around
beating
in
yourself up
chains.
about it.
You're in
And
bondage and in
yes.
chains. It's like when I think about that, what I see is I don't know if you remember those old movies where the person was in jail and they used to have the ball and chain
Mm-hmm.
tied to their ankle. That's what I see. I see so many people walking around with this ball and chain tied to their ankle. And it's so heavy, it's weighing them down because the ball and chain represent the guilt, and it's not the guilt that they carry for other people, but it's the guilt and unforgiveness that they carry for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and it's holding them back, and it's stopping them. and it's not allowing them to go where God is trying to take them and trying to put them at, because the ball and the chain and the guilt is so heavy, it's weighing them down. So they're not even able to move because
Mm-hmm.
it's so heavy. And so, I mean, that's just like the vision that God had shown me when we were talking about that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like there are people, most likely people that will probably hear this podcast, that are just being weighed down by guilt of not forgiving themselves.
Yes, yes. You got to forgive yourself. I don't care what you did, what you said. There's nothing that you can ever do that God will turn his back on you and say, "No, I don't forgive you for that." If you come to him openly and say, "Hey, I messed up. I fell short." In fact, if you've already gotten a relationship with him, if you've already accepted his son, Jesus Christ on the cross, his death, his burial, resurrection, if you've already received that as truth, as fact, if you've given your life to Christ, your sins have already been covered, the past, the present, and the future.
That's
You're
right.
good. Lord, I messed up today. Forgive me. Done. It's instantaneous.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we have a free pass
Right.
to just
To
keep
go out.
sinning
And then
just cause.
that's another thing too. A lot of folks feel like, oh well, if I just pray and ask for forgiveness, he's gonna forgive me. Well, he's gonna forgive you, but that doesn't mean that you're gonna go out there tomorrow and do the same thing all over again. That's
Yeah,
not how that
yeah,
works.
yeah. That's not how it works. But but at the same time, God, that's what's so special about God. You can fall flat on your face. He's gonna be the first one there to dust you off and pick you up. When everybody else abandons you, he'll be that one in the room that's going to be there, not judging you, not looking down on you, not turning his back on you. He's always going to be there for you no matter what. He knows who you are. He already knew what you were going to do. He knows how
Right.
you're made up.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
he loves
Right.
you unconditionally. He loves you in a way that nobody else could ever love you. And so, with that said, that's why the relationship is so important, and that's why it's so critical. As we've just been talking these last few moments, is don't carry around that weight of guilt. Don't carry around that those stresses and worryings and all of those negative energies, because that's exactly what the enemy wants to have for you in your life. He loves that. And he will encourage you to fuel that more and more and more, and you'll be depressed and sickly and wondering why everything is breaking down and going on
Right.
with you,
Right.
all because you won't let stuff go. You won't let it
Right.
up off of you. You won't
Right.
forgive.
Right.
You're just carrying all this anger and frustration inside of you. Don't do that.
Right.
It's literally deadly. Don't do
Right.
that.
Right.
So
And it's funny, and not to be off topic, but it's funny that you say that because I did a Facebook Live once, and I'm gonna try to phrase this in a way that's not too graphic. But the question was, "Are you spiritually constipated?"
mm,
And and people ask me, well, "What do you mean? Are you spiritually constipated?" I said, "Well, you got it. Okay, as it is in the natural, so it is in the spirit." Now, when you're naturally constipated, your stomach hurts, you're having problems going to the bathroom. When you're spiritually constipated, the same thing happens. Your body starts to break down, you may have high blood pressure, your feelings are easily hurt. You take everything personal, and those are the emotions that you have when you are holding things in spiritually. So there's some things that you're gonna have to release spiritually to clean out that spiritual gut the same way you clean out your natural gut.
yes, yes. Perfect illustration. Perfect. I totally get that, and many of us again are guilty of that. We walk around, as you said, spiritually constipated. And we got to break free from that. We have to release. I mean,
Right.
it's like, and my pastor has oftentimes, used this example, just speaking about how, when you don't forgive, when you hold those negative energies inside, it's like having it's like having poison inside of you,
Yeah.
but somehow thinking that the other person is the one going to get sick from it.
Right.
But you're the
Right.
one that's holding
Right.
it in at
Right.
some
Right.
point. So to your point, when you use spiritual constipation, it's the same concept. Eventually things have to come up out of you,
Right.
and the reason why our bodily functions do that is these are things that are not, these are the
Right.
poisons,
And
these are
those
the
are that's the
toxins
waste that we have to
the
eliminate.
waste to eliminate. So just like there's physical waste to eliminate,
Spiritual
there's
waste.
there's spiritual waste to eliminate that those negative things, and you that it's the spirit that you got to let use to flush that up out of you. Get
Right.
that up out of you. Get
Right.
that hatred out of you. Get that
Right.
unforgiveness up out of you. Get that worry
Right.
out of you. That stress out of you. That anger out of you. That you know all of any whatever adjectives you want to use. Get all of that stuff
Out.
up out of you, and the more cleansed you are of those things, the more focused, the
To
more
become
aware, the more discerning, the more available you make yourself to God to be able to use you as He equipped and designed you to be used, just as you are. There's nothing wrong with you. And let's not get caught up in that. There's nothing wrong. You are exactly how God made you and desired for you to be. Oftentimes it's just that we don't know it.
right.
We don't know it, but that's where the relationship comes in, because the closer you get in a relationship with him, he's going to reveal to you what those gifts are that he has
Right.
inside of you. He's going to reveal to you, the purpose in that pain that you've been going through over the course of your life, why these situations and circumstances have taken place. What's the bigger picture here? He's going to reveal those, but you got to make yourself open to him and eliminate the distractions of the world, because those are the things that, again, the enemy wants us to get caught up in, because it keeps us off. It keeps us, as you stated earlier, about keeps us off balance, off
Right.
kilter. We don't know
Okay.
what's going on. We don't. We're not in that flow. We're not in that rhythm. But
Right. Right. And I can feel it. I don't know about anybody else, but I can. I guess my relationship with God is so tight. I can feel it where. Wait a minute. Well, something's not right here.
something ain't right. Yeah.
Something's off here. Let me go and pray and get myself together. Because something's a little off here.
Right. Right. So yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Latria, this has been, man, such a powerful, powerful conversation. I'm in season 2 of my podcast, and this has definitely been one of the most powerful conversations that I've ever had with any of my guests. So I am so thankful that you take the time out to share as you have today, being so transparent, being so authentic, and sharing with us. And as I started off at the top of the show, and it did not disappoint, I have truly been blessed. I know my listeners have been blessed. Uh, Such a powerful story, and I'm just so happy to see the anointing that God has placed over your life, and all the works the way that He's not only worked in your life up to this point, but just the stuff that is still to be done. Through you, I mean, everything about God is just radiating all over you, and it's so refreshing to connect with somebody like yourself, and to be reminded about just how powerful and how loving and how awesome God is, because you are a walking testimony to that. And so, again, so thankful for you being on board. But before I let you go, as is customary here on the Blessings in the Streets podcast, we do want to take an opportunity to love on you, to celebrate you, to affirm and acknowledge you. So if you got anything exciting that's coming up, again, professionally or personally, that you want to share with the audience, how they can connect with you, keep up with you, what you got going on, please do share that. Because again, we want to celebrate all of those things and make it known.
Okay, well, I don't have anything coming up in the near future, but you can connect with me on all social media platforms. On Facebook, it's Latria, Latria as a Tom, Rea, Anita, Anita, Russ, Russ. Um, on Instagram, it's Coach Latria 79. On TikTok, it's Coach Latria 79 or Speaker Latria. Um, my website is www.coachlatria.net. I have a store on there where I have t-shirts, empowerment t-shirts. I have keychains. My books are on there as well. I just published, well, not just. This book will be published a year. in August. My memoir is called I'm Not Doing That Anymore. It's book number 7. That's on the website as well. You can purchase that there. If you purchase it off the website, you will get an autographed copy. You can also purchase it off of Amazon, but I would prefer to get it off the website because when you get it off the website, you get an autographed copy as well as some additional goods. So, that's pretty much it.
That's plenty right there. I mean, again, we're talking, ladies and gentlemen. She said at the top of the show, we got a 7-time author, coach, speaker. She's doing it all. She's being a little modest right now, but she's doing it all and then some. So please do check her out. Tap into her services and products, etc. I know you also do. You have your Motivational Monday live sessions
Mhm.
that you
Yep, I
do
have
as well.
motivational Mondays. I actually just started that back.
Mhm.
It's every Monday on Facebook Live. No, I'm sorry. Every Monday on Facebook on my main page. And I try to do it in the 8 o'clock hour. I try to keep it at a minimum of 10 to 15 minutes, but sometimes the Lord allows me to ramble a little longer.
It's okay. Me too.
So,
Guilty.
I I I just started it back. And it's funny because you never know who's paying attention to you. You
Mhm.
never know who is benefiting from what you're doing. So let that be a lesson to somebody. What you're doing may not be big to you. It may not be a big splash to you, but there's somebody out there depending on you to do what you need to do so they can do what they need to do.
Absolutely. Wow, wow. Well, again, Latria, thank you so much for being on the show today. It is truly a blessing, is an understatement, as to what you have done for us this evening. Very, very powerful show. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And I told you before we started, I said whenever we have little technical difficulties, challenges, getting things kicked off right, that's my cue that this is getting ready to be something special. And it was every bit of that and then some. So sorry, enemy, your plan didn't work. We made it happen, and God gets the glory as a result.
Amen. Amen.
And for my listeners, if you've enjoyed our show today, the content, what we're all about here, please subscribe, please share, please like, please comment. Because again, this is what the Blessings in the Streets podcast is about: empowering, uplifting, encouraging, letting you know that regardless of the adversities and storms of life that you might be going through, it doesn't mean that it's the end of it all. These are opportunities, and you have to look at those storms. It's just that these are opportunities to grow, to develop, to become better versions of yourselves. None of this is by accident. None of this is a oops moment. This is God setting you up, positioning you for something greater and mightier in your life. Not only to that will be a blessing to you, but positioning you to be a blessing to others as well. So with that said, remember here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, you keep fighting that good fight. Don't allow that adversity to overcome you. Remember what we talked about earlier about the importance of forgiveness and the importance of letting that guilt go and leaving it behind. Leave it at the altar. God is the ultimate problem solver. There's nothing too big, too great that you can't take him to. Then there's nothing that you can do that's going to have him turn his back on you. He loves you. He wants nothing but the best for you. And if you don't have a relationship with him, today is a mighty fine day to make that decision. And I promise you, and I'm sure Latria will co-sign on this, that it'll be the best decision that you will
The
ever
best
make.
decision.
So with
Now we said the best decision. We never said the easiest,
no,
but it will be the
it
best.
will be the best decision. We're not promising you that there won't be difficult and challenging times, but we can promise you that his promises are rock solid.
That's
That
right.
that you can trust in them, that you can lock into them. And as Latria has been saying all along, his message to you is, I got you. I don't care what it looks like, what it feels like, what you think it might come out to be. Just know that I got you. That's what you can bank on 100%, 24/7, all day, every day when you're in a relationship with God. So until next time, you take care of yourselves. I look forward to seeing you again on our next episode. Have a great rest of your day.